Welcome to Down the Rabbit Hole Quilts. I'm Tessa, and today I thought we would talk about, or rather figure out, what we could do with pre-cuts. I am obviously a hoarder of pre-cuts. I go to the fabric stores, my favorite quilt stores, and I see these beautiful colors, and I end up bringing them home because I think, oh wow, I can do something with that. And time goes by and they sit here. So, sometimes I see them online. They come from everywhere. So, whether it be the layer cakes, the jelly rolls, the charms, the fat quarters, whatever, I end up collecting it. So I decided that it's time to start doing something with it. So today we're going to do a project with 2.5-inch strips. And so let me put away all these pre-cuts we're not going to use today and get out the stuff we are going to use, and we'll get started. Now the fabrics I've chosen today for this project are this white, and it has a little white on white swirl on it. It's really kind of hard to see. I'll see if I can take a picture and post it up so you can see a little better. And then one pack of 40 pieces of 2.5-inch strips. So that is going to make our quilt. And that will make a quilt that is 56 by 66. And you need a yard and a quarter of this and one of these. I'm thinking I'm going to want to border on mine. So I already had some fabric, and looks like I forgot to take my sticker off telling me how much was on there, of these two batiks. And I think they would make a great border. This one kind of looks like turtles, and this one is turtles, and it kind of goes with the whole beachy vibe. So now the pattern calls for you to take each strip and to cut it at 8.5-inch intervals so that you end up with 2.5 by 8.5-inch pieces. And then you were to randomly sew them together so that you got 50 different blocks for your quilt, or pretty much different. So I thought about it, and then I thought, no, I don't have that much time in my life. And I have a lot of things I want to do. So I am going to go ahead and sew them together into 3 different strips together, and then I'm going to cut them into 8.5-inch sections. And I should be able to get 3 to 4 out of each one. And as long as I have a total of 50 of them when I'm done, that will be enough. So the strips are all sewn together. And as you can see, even though these came out of the same strip pack, they're not all the same length. So you will have to trim off and edge that up before you start cutting your pieces. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll start cutting our segments. So we're just going to cut right here at the 18.5 mark. And your segment will look like this. And I'm just going to go through and cut the rest of this strip and all the others. And then we start cutting my strips. Now it says that you need to have 9 strips cut in order to get all of the strips you need cut out of it, because each of these 2.5-inch strips will then be subcut into 6.5-inch segments. So each one will be 2.5 by 6.5. So let me just get this cut here. Alright, so those segments will look like this. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to take our strips that look like this, and we are going to add one of these to the side. Now it doesn't matter if you add it to this side or this side. And I would actually, if you're doing it the way we're doing it here, where you sewed strips and you cut multiples out of it, you might want to flip it back and forth. So sometimes this is on top and sometimes this is on top. But we're just going to go through the entire pile, and we're going to just sew that on there with a 1/4 inch seam. Now All the blocks are sewn together, and I went ahead and started arranging them on the design wall. It was pretty easy this time because the colors all coordinate, and so it wasn't hard to put them in place and try to get them random. And you can see that even though we did duplicates, you know, by doing a strip and not doing individual and sewing them all together with the 2.5 by 8.5, but we did long strips and then cut them, you still get a really random look going on. Really like where this is going. Going to start sewing together the sections. So it's finished. All the blocks are sewn together, and I went ahead and added a 3.5 inch strip of border around it, just like the pattern calls for. And this is exactly what it would look like if you followed the pattern. It's a good size quilt. It measures out at 56 by 66, and that's with 1.25 yards of fabric for the background and one strip pack of at least 40 strips. So it's a really great quilt, but I kind of want to do something to pop it and give it some wow. So give me a few minutes and I'll be back with some new borders on it. Ta-da! It's all done. It did take me longer than I thought because I kept changing my mind on what I wanted to do with the borders. So let's talk about those for just a minute. Now the purple border here is 1.5 inches wide cut, and then it's finished off at 1 inch wide border. The top border and the bottom borders are 6.5 inches, and the side borders are 4.5 inches. Now you can see I went ahead and I appliqued some little turtles on here, and I will give you a close-up of that in just a few minutes so you can see it. So here are the little turtles, and they have just been appliqued on. I got the little turtle design from the internet. I found a page that had like coloring book outlines that you could print off, and I went ahead and printed that off, and then I shrank down the little turtle to be the size I needed him to be. So here are all my little friends on the quilt. They're only about 4 inches tall, so they're not super big. Now in order to make the little turtles, I went out on the internet and I found a picture of a turtle, and you can see it's a place you can get free coloring book pages, and I just screenshot it with my phone and I printed it off, but it was bigger than what I had room for on my border. So I went ahead and used my printer to go ahead and shrink him down to about 70%. Now this isn't the greatest. My printer was having some issues there, so I just filled in the spots where my printer didn't do its job. But now it's the size I needed, so I went with it. Now the first thing I had to do was to trace the little guy onto some Heat and Bond or some kind of adhesive, and so I like to use Heat and Bond Light, and that's what I use for these little turtles. But you can use whatever your favorite is, and this is a scrap piece. You can see I've cut other things out of it before, but then I just had to figure out where I wanted to make my cuts. And so in my case I have 3 sections. I have the body of the turtle, I have the outer shell, and I have an inner shell. And so all I did was lay my paper on top of it, and I started with the outer turtle and I just sketched him. I just followed the lines, traced him on here, and I went ahead and went around the outer shell, and I'll show you why later. And this doesn't have to be perfect because you can trim it up with your scissors. So there's our first part. I just traced the outline of the turtle. And then next, I traced the outer rim of his shell, like so. And then I did the inner ring of his shell because I wanted my turtle to have a two-colored back. So there are the 3 pieces of my applique turtle. And the next thing I'm going to do is adhere them to the fabric I'm going to use for the little guys. So I'm just going to cut them apart so I don't have to, waste too much fabric. And when I cut them out, I give them at least 1/4 of an inch around so that when I cut them out of the fabric that I have some room to trim them up. So now I have the main turtle, his back, and then the inner part of his shell. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to adhere these to the fabrics. Now we're going to iron these onto the back side of the fabric. So if you have something that's directional for yours, let's say, I don't know, you're going to put lettering or something on your quilt, you're going to want to flip it around so that your letters turn out the correct way. So I've got some green here that I'm going to use for the little turtle himself. Oh, about messed it up myself. Got to make sure to put it on the back. And just follow your manufacturer's directions for how long it's to take and press. So we got our little guy on there. And for his shell, we're going to use this fun swirly stuff. So I'm going to try to fussy cut that so that it's on the right spot. And we'll use that, we'll use it for his big one. So I guess it won't matter so much, but we'll go ahead and try to get some of the swirl in there. Actually, let's use it for the little one so we can get a cute little swirl. That's the nice thing when you're just making it up as you go along and it's not a kit, you're not, tied to the rules. So then we have one more here, and let me see if I got something over here where it will fit. We have a strip of batik that is left over from another project. So let's go ahead and use that for the outer shell. Once these are cooled off, you can go ahead and cut around them. And this time when you cut, you can cut, on the line so that you get exactly what you needed and not the extra. It just makes it easier to cut out if you add, like an extra 1/4 inch around. So our back will have this nice swirl in the middle of it. The undershell will have this nice green, so our little shell will just fit over our big shell like that. Alright, so I got the turtle cut out, his back, and then the inner shell. That's a lot of bulk to have the 3 shells on top of each other like that. So what I did was I went ahead and I just trimmed and took a section out like this so that it's just like the bottom half plus a little bit, and then I did the same thing at the top. Leaving a piece like this, and that will just help in positioning it too. So let me just grab okay, we're going to go ahead and take the backing off of these little turtles. And you can see by taking the middle out, we're getting rid of the bulk. But we're also, it's a great way so you can line up, so you make sure everything stays right where you want it to be. We have our great little swirl. Now I've got my turtle on my pressing sheet and I've got him positioned here how I want him. I'm going to go ahead and press him together. So let me just get his shell and everything where I want it. And then we'll give him a quick little press. Let him cool for just a second. And he will just peel right off. And will look like this. Now, the fabric that he's going to go on needs a little stabilization on it. And so I like to use this stuff called French Fuse, and I just get it at my local quilt store, and it's a very flexible stabilizer. And let's just cut a piece of it here, and we're going to adhere it to the back of our batik strip just to give it a little more body so that it doesn't bunch up. And the nice thing about batiks is there's really no front or back, so we're going to go ahead and lay it on here. Oh, you know what? I got to trim it just a little bit more. I do that with my rotary cutter, but I have my table kind of full right now. All right. It is sticky, so you don't want it to get onto your board. And we're just going to adhere the French fuse to where we're going to sew, and you can see it's nice and flexible, works great. And then on the front side we're going to add our little turtle, and we're just going to give him a good pressing so he's adhered like this. Now I went around my turtles with a blanket stitch. You could zigzag them, you could do just, raw edge around it. You can, do whatever you want to do. I chose to do the blanket stitch, and it was set at basically 2.5 or 2.5 and 2.5 for the stitch length and the stitch width. That worked good for me. So the great thing about this quilt is that you could do a lot of different things. You could put sailboats across the top if you'd like a sailing theme. If it's a fall look, you could put leaves, falling throughout it. There are just so many options, and I know I'm definitely going to be using this quilt pattern again. I could see this being a quilt of valor quilt really easily, with the red, white, and blue and the striping, and then putting stars across, maybe a field of blue with stripes, and this is all different shades of reds and white. Anyway, I think it's super easy, and I think it has a lot of options, and I hope you get to make one and that you enjoyed making this one with me. Some of you have asked me about how I'm going to finish my quilts off. In this case, I am going to use the strips I had left and the turtle fabric that I had originally shown you guys that I was going to use. I'm just going to go ahead and use it on the back side of it. And I think it'll look fabulous. I think, you can do whatever you want. Minky'd be great on it, but I'm guessing that this one will probably end up hanging maybe on a wall. Not positive yet, but we'll find out. So anyway, I hope you had a good time watching the strip quilt being made. And if you enjoyed yourself, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.